Can you see me? Let's see. You're welcome, Susan. Hey, Troy. Unmute. Okay. How's it going, man?
Good. How are you?
Doing very well. Very well. I'm in a little bit in the light over here.
Yeah.
Looks like it's a little chilly where you're at. Where you at? I forgot where you were at. Were you in New Mexico?
I am. Yeah, I'm in Taos.
Oh, you're in Taos. No wonder. About time to start snow skiing over there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Big thing out here. Yeah, it's a little chilly here, but it's nice out.
So how's the solstice been going for you?
Kind of heavy. But yeah, good. Just flowing with what's showing up. A lot of creativity's been wanting to come through, so that's been really enjoyable.
What's going on? Why is it so heavy? You want to share that? Or is that something?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's a specific reason why it kind of feels like natural ebbs and flows. Yeah. I can feel myself debating sharing something, but I guess I'll share it. My brother was in a fatal car accident last week.
Wow.
So I think that's been impacting me and weighing on me. I don't know how much that relates to kind of just the last few days in the solstice, but it's definitely in my field. Yeah.
It definitely relates.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's a relevant subject. I mean, I think a lot of people in the community know that Sherilyn passed away a couple of months ago. Other people have been transitioning, and I remember 3-4 years ago, 2 years ago, people talking about when we hit a certain point, there would be a lot of people transitioning. I don't know if we're starting to see that now or what. Ramdas, he transitioned on the solstice itself.
Oh, did he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he transitioned 2 days ago on the solstice. But I think that we were talking about that on an open mic a couple of days ago. I think yesterday, and some of the comments were along those lines of where I think somebody was talking about one of the panelists was talking about how some people when we got to a certain point will have kind of done their work and would choose to move on, and then some would choose to hold space, just depending on what our role is. But I mean, we still have to deal with the human aspect and what these losses are. I mean, have you had much of a struggle with that, or are you able to keep it in a perspective where you don't have to go through all the emotions of that?
Yeah, it's interesting that the night I found out, there was a lot of emotion, a lot of grieving. And then the next couple of days, I had this really open-hearted experience where I felt like I was in touch with him in a new way. And I was feeling him, and I was feeling this tenderness in me that was really beautiful and enjoyable, actually. So there's been a mixture of different experiences around it for me.
So what was that like? The open-hearted experience, what was that like? I mean, were you meditating or just he just popped in?
I mean, I kind of, a little bit of both, a little bit of just it feeling like that showed up and some intention around it. Welcoming communion with him, basically. And whenever I would do that, I'd get this playful feeling, because that's sort of who he was. And the sense that he's just in a really beautiful place, and he's experiencing so much love, and he has so much love for everyone. And so it was tapping me into I don't know how to put words to it, but it felt expansive and desired. I wanted to hang out in that space with him.
Yeah. Did you ask for it, or did he just come knocking on the door?
I think mostly I asked for it. Mostly
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah.
"Hey, you out there? You want to talk?" I even made a video
You did?
that I shared on my wall. Yeah, where I kind of invited him in and then spoke to the experience I was having in sensing his presence, and
On camera.
so that was really good.
On camera. So you actually did it on camera. Well, that's powerful.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and I tagged him so a bunch of people from his life that I didn't know got to see it and appreciated it. So that was fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe that's something we're all going to have to deal with. If these prognostications are accurate, and it seems like there's some validity to them. If you look at this year seems to be something that's been occurring, or maybe I'm noticing it more. But it seems like it's part of what's happening. I mean, if I look back at the last, I know actually when I first woke up 8 years ago, I don't know, there was probably, God, there must have been 7 or 8 that passed in 2 years. Family, friends, that type of thing. And
Wow.
and then going through the personal mostly solitary expansion, these things occurred. And I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I don't remember the exact number, but I think there were 7 of them that happened over 24 months. And I know 5 of them came right to me. Like when I sought them out, they came in. Yeah. And brought relevant information to me, and even though I couldn't share it with anyone, and get any type of validation, I told a few people and they thought I was crazy because they thought I already was crazy. So that's interesting that you put it out. You put it out and actually shared that on the air, because that's like the spirit walks to me. You have these moments alone, and then you just turn on the camera and you share them. You're still having the same experience, but there's other energies present.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah.
Well,
It was really beautiful. I got nothing but positive responses from people, or no response at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got to believe that this is going to be. I mean, look. I mean, if everything is what it seems to be, or is headed toward where it seems to be headed, or has landed, or whatever, that would seem to be part of it. I mean, if we're merging the physical and the non-physical, that would apply everywhere. And the illusion of death is a big part of it. I know, not a big influence, but one of the influences on me when I woke up after I started to look for validation was The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, written by Anne Kagan, who was I think a psychologist who was a sister. And it was just, messages, conversations with her brother, about what he was viewing, a lot like what you just kind of described, which I can relate to as well, with a couple of disincarnated souls. Kind of spoke of the same thing, like, don't worry, it's all good, none of it was real. And a lot of that kind of humorous and jokester kind of frequency.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was feeling a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's heavy. I didn't know that. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. You were it's a good subject, though. It really is. It's a perfect example of the contrast and the polarities. You know, so on one hand, you have this physical loss, but on the other hand, you have kind of a non-physical expansion. And I think
Right.
the energies are supporting that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the sense that I was in some ways feeling closer to him.
Yeah.
In the recent experiences after his death than I did when he was here. Like something opened up in a new way. That
Yeah.
felt really beautiful.
Yeah. And I think these things too, now that they're happening now, they have there's something different about it. You know, like these deaths, that the succession of deaths that I was privy to in my life with mostly relatives of all ages, which kind of culminated with my cousin who was 8 months younger than me in 2014. So from 2011 to 2014, these things happened. And but there wasn't as much. It wasn't as concrete as they seem to be now. You know, I remember when I was in my mid-20s and I first started like really researching and writing every night. I had a high school teacher that I was in his filmmaking class as a senior, and he was a real troubled soul, and he was gay, and he had contracted. They didn't know at the time, but he had contracted a fatal. I don't know if it was AIDS or hepatitis or whatever, but he wasn't in great health. And for some reason, I'm writing in the middle of the night one night, and I can just feel him come in. And I didn't have those kind of experiences, but I think about that, and I ended up writing this poem. And I thought, wow, that was really weird, but it really kind of, reasoned it away. But these that are happening now, I don't think the connection is being broken, or at least it's being strengthened. Would be a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Which is like what you experienced.
Yeah. And I was wondering how much of it's me and how much of it, actually you're having me reflect on how much of it is different energies that allow for a different experience. Because there's been a lot of death in my past as well. But I didn't experience this sort of communion that I am now. So maybe it's a combination of I'm more available for that experience, and the environment's more available for it.
Yeah. Well, I think our, for lack of a better word, our vessels, our energetic vessels are cleaner. Yeah. But because if I look back at what I was talking about in the early part of my journey, some of these were very easy to access and some were not. The ones that were not were the ones where I had illusionary conflict or guilt or shame that was blocking the connectivity. So I think it is. I think we are more open. We're more of a conduit. And then the other thing that this reminds me of too, to your point, is I know when I first woke up, I seemed to be doing, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I kept finding myself in these situations where I was an intermediary between the one that passed and a relative. And over and over and over again, the ones that transitioned would tell me to tell the relative what you talked about. You know, they'd come in joking. They would say, "Look, we're fine. It's all good." You know, and if he or she that's still incarnated doesn't let go, it kind of holds us back a little bit. You know. So I think that makes all the sense in the world. So did you have a full blown conversation? Because
no, I opened that possibility up, but that wasn't really my experience. It was more just a sense of energy that I was sort of putting words to as I felt it. Yeah.
I was just wondering if he gave you any directions as to where you're going from there. Last time I talked to you, you said you felt like something was on the cusp.
No, but I didn't ask. And that has me thinking, like, maybe I could ask. I guess I'm not asking that question as much right now for some reason. Lately, I don't find myself wondering into the future as much. I'm sort of
Yeah.
more moment to moment. I don't know. It didn't occur to me to ask for any kind of guidance from him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know that we need to be thinking about that anymore, if we even have to.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this a little bit last time. I think it just pops in and we go. We go do whatever we're directed to do.
Yeah, future orientation feels like a beautiful curiosity, but it can also be a lack of trust for me. Of like, I need to know what's going to happen because I don't know if I'm going to be safe. I don't know if it's going to be okay. And I guess I feel less of that in general, so I ask less questions about it.
Yeah. 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 I'm not really asking those questions. I think mine's more of a, I'm going to be in this area or this region or this part of the country. Who do I know down there? What can we get going? That type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, but as far as like, you know, like we just spent a weekend in a really cool place up in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And I'm thinking, man, I'd love to just settle here, you know? And then the other part of me is like, you are here, you know? I mean, you can come here whenever you want to, physically or not.
Right.
Yeah. So some of this thinking that we have, whether it be planning or security or stabilization or whatever, it's like the whole dialogue is just disappearing. It's not linear. So,
yeah, and it feels more alive for me to be orienting toward the future when I'm feeling less secure, when I'm feeling more fear in my experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So it's kind of a sign like, oh, when I'm feeling settled and grounded and I'm not really even, I'm not looking in that direction as much. So that's interesting. Right.
Well,
that's information in some way, potentially.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I know throughout my whole life, like whenever the pressure was on, and I know it's going to kind of sound like a paradox, but when the pressure was on and it was so intense that you have no choice but to go into that space, into that intuitive space. In other words, like you walk around a corner and there's two guys holding a stick or a wild dog or something, and your instincts take over. I guess that's what I'm saying. So the whole that whole dialogue in your head it's not even there. It doesn't have a chance to enter. And maybe that's what I'm getting, like what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's almost as if it pulls us out of the linear perspective and into the immediacy of what's happening right in front of us. Yeah.
Without having to have the fear factor. Right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think a part of that too has got to be this thing that's happening with we'll just call it instant manifestation. Like at least on an energetic level, like when we're in that space, Morgan and I were talking about it today, imagining, we're actually creating, and it's more substantial now. It's even though it's not in the physical reality at the moment, energetically, it's occurred. And
right.
And in time,
illusion of time. Right.
And in time, it'll have a physical, it'll have a physical parallel at some point.
Right.
And it's moving fast.
Yeah, that sense of acceleration during these times.
Yeah. Did you have to utilize any type of tools or method or anything to get past the grief and confusion and all that stuff?
Not anything that I can remember or that I was conscious of. I think I was pretty much just surrendered and encouraging whatever wanted to happen. I was actually enjoying the grieving process. Something about it felt cathartic for me. There was like a wailing and like that I guess all I really did was make space for it.
Like a purging.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that,
Yeah.
like an energetic purging. Yeah, and I guess one thing I did was was sort of intentionality is I went on his Facebook wall and I started reading all the comments, and that helped me to feel into the beauty of the experience of him and all the lives that he touched, and everyone that was having their emotional experience around it. I was able to tap into my own through that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that almost kind of felt like a practice in itself to do that.
Yeah. Well, and there's been a whole lot of I feel stupid even using the word now at this stage in the game, but little deaths. There's been a lot of little identity deaths going on for people, and they've been accelerating, and it hasn't been easy,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting too, because if I look back at, I might get in trouble for saying this, but if I look back at my friend, our friend Sherilyn, when she transitioned, it was really interesting because I watched all the comments, and there was thousands of posts and stuff, and I'm not questioning anyone's intention or anything like that. I'm just talking about energy and what we can learn from each other. What I can learn from observing what I observe. It was interesting because some of the expressions were about the expressor, about themselves. It was more about them than the person that transitioned.
Right.
And some were the other end. The only reason I mentioned that is because it was an interesting thing to observe energetically, because it really mirrored what's been happening, which is there is no middle ground. We're either going this way or we're going that way, and neither one of them, I'm condoning or anything like that. I'm just saying that, there was a lot of messages, from those observations to me about service to self, service to the collective, pure intention, balance, alignment, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I found myself more in that space in the beginning. I made 2 videos, and the first one was, it was sort of, that was almost the topic of it, that I felt guilty about making it about myself.
Yeah.
Because I was sharing from my personal experience of what happened.
Yeah.
And then sort of exploring that.
Yeah.
What is that? Is that selfish? Is that just a natural human experience to put everything through the filter of our own, how we're impacted?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Because when Sherilyn transitioned, we had just spent 2 weeks with her. In fact, we went back to Sedona exactly 30 days after she transitioned. So we'd spent 2 weeks with her. I think it was about another 10 days or so after we left. We stayed at her house. But I was watching everything, and I wanted to, because I had just done some recording at a couple of functions, and of course we were at her house. I took some videos. I probably had 6. I did 2 with her. We had a Soulogy gathering. She did a recital that was incredible. And I thought, well, I want to take like a montage of the different things and do like a tribute, and maybe even do a show, but but I couldn't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it is because I didn't feel like, because I thought I would do it after 2, 3, 4 weeks went by, but I couldn't do it because I felt like I wasn't clear. Like, why am I doing this? Am I doing it? Do I need to do it? Does it need to be said?
Yeah.
And so when in doubt, do nothing. That's helped me a lot in the last couple
I
of
tend
years.
to do that too. Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel more clarity now? I guess I'm curious if this space opens an invitation for you to say anything now that you didn't say then.
About Sherilyn?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. You know, this expansion that we've had in the particularly in I'm not going to just consider myself unique in it, because it's not. But this expansion is some of the methods, I guess, that I've have utilized or gone to has been less talking, you know, less expressing, more contemplation, more silence, and in that, you know, in that respect, what I've found is that I've actually seen the power of, from a human perspective, saying nothing. In other words, I've seen the power of knowing, and then maybe expressing in a non-verbal, non-physically demonstrative way, but still seeing the impact that the energy of, well, let's say the energy of Todd can have, or an individual can have. I guess to answer your question, is using this as an example, because I've had 3 or 4 communions or connections with Sherilyn from the very first night that I heard about it. So part of me would say, man, I'd love to put this little montage together, particularly like the night we got there, which was just pure magic, you know, and just relay the story. And we spent 14 nights talking to her, and all the incredible things that happened. And then the other side of me says, well, then, you know, why are you going to do that? You know, are you going to do it so people can know more about her? I mean, I don't know the answer to this question, and I'm not aligned enough to make a choice. Maybe the opportunity will present itself one day. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't diminish the experience that I had. I think the impact that Morgan and I had, the impact of the connection that Morgan and I had during those 14 days, doesn't have to have the, let's call it the attribute of a video or a you know, some type of paying homage. It doesn't have to. I know and have seen that the energetic impact on the holy grid occurred as it occurred, and I still don't know the answer. But to me, I'm okay with where it's at. I'm okay with, you know, with the energetic, incredible soulgasmic explosion that occurred during those 2 weeks. I know it was very important and vital, and yeah, I don't need to talk about it. That's where that's where I'd leave it right now. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one, because if you look at the whole trip that we're on, death is it. If you take out the concept of death from an energetic standpoint, that wipes out everything. It wipes out loss, lack, limitation, separation. There is no survival crap going on. Because if there's no death, then what's there to survive? You know, I remember walking the streets a few years ago, and it was like I kept hearing, I gotta walk. I tell myself I gotta walk. Each step I take is another step towards survival. And then one day I heard, a soul doesn't survive, a soul doesn't die. You can't survive if you don't die. If there's no possibility of death, survive. If death isn't in the dictionary, neither is the word survival. Because how can you survive something when you're not going to die?
Right.
You know, that's like us playing a video game. It's like playing an old video game in the arcade. You know, where and all you gotta do is put another quarter in the machine.
Yep.
Right. You know, so it's close. Right. So.
Yeah, it totally changes the perspective on it. Yeah. Yeah. then it just becomes, if survival is not an issue, it's more about comfort at that point. It's like, okay, I'm not going to die, but I don't want this journey to be too uncomfortable.
That's true.
Or
That's
yeah,
different.
so yeah, that's a different
That's different.
Yeah.
That's different. That's different. Yeah, because I struggled with that. I struggled a lot with that. I wasn't worried about surviving, but I was settling for a lifestyle that I could put up with, but that wasn't necessary, you know. So I can relate to that. I want to just pull up this comment real quick out of respect for Joanne Kane. I know there's some other ones in there, and I'm sorry I can't get to all of them, but she said the experience of grief was different from losing my husband to cancer. The whole social circle and so on, then losing my son, Robert, to suicide on 1/1/11. The fear in other mothers' eyes and questions I was asked, exclamation point. But I was allowed a meeting with Robert in the spiritual world. It was in a place commonly called the waiting room. And I can recall talking to 3 or 4. One was very close to me, and that connotation of the waiting room applied. And in fact, we were talking about this on the way back today, about how, there's not just from what I've experienced, but, there's some books like Dr. Morse, the near-death experience books, and some of those things where they talk about there's a period when we come out of this transition and we are surrounded by family that is helping us to separate what was real and what wasn't. What applied and what doesn't apply. So, yeah. But it's definitely from an energetic standpoint, if we take the physical separation out of it, it's still the same. It's the same thing, although more intense than we've been seeing a lot of over the last few months, especially the last couple of months. People, even people that said I'm good all the time, I'm sliding through this thing with ease and grace, and they're like going, "Holy crap, what's going on?"
Yeah. Yeah. Transitional times.
What do you think's coming?
It has. I don't know. The thought that popped in for me is maybe you've already sort of alluded to it, is, are we in some sort of collective, quote, death process, some sort of transition, in the same way that people don't die when they leave this world? Maybe there's something that that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a call.
No problem.
It's more of a movement into something that's very different from what was, just as when we moved out of these physical bodies.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. Well, if you think about it, you've got plenty of people in these circles. They're going to talk about experiences that we might call interdimensional or dimensional, that can, and not always, but can include physical materialization of energies or entities or whatever you want to call it. Now, what's the difference between a disincarnated, so to speak, dragon or galactic brother than someone who we know was incarnated, or we knew that was incarnated, that's no longer incarnated in terms of the human realm? What's the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe largely the difference is just how our mind frames it.
Yeah. And the reality being that we're all here. Whatever that means.
Yeah. I was just also having the thought that death and birth are essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
That it's one process. So it does feel like something new is being birthed into this reality right now, which implies death. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. If something's being birthed, yeah. I mean, like they talk about, you know, for instance, if you talk about, again, the energetic vessel, you can't stuff new stuff into the vessel unless there's room for it.
Right.
Right. So by the same token, then something's got to die for something to got to, you know, for something else to, or for it, say the same energy to come in, transform to something else or into something else or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. But they go together.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of what's leaving and creating that space?
Well, maybe it's both. Maybe just as there is no, because I mean, if you look at the polarity of it, birth is one thing, death is another thing, dying is another thing.
Right.
Well, if one doesn't exist,
Mhm.
how can the other one? You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Right. It's just one
Yeah,
continuous,
right. So,
timeless. Yeah.
so that's now. I do think that that's going to happen with what's happening with this. I think what's going to happen is whatever we think today, you know, like we've hit the bottom of the proverbial rabbit hole.
Mhm.
We're going to find that it's deeper and wider, you know, and on one hand becomes more complicated, but on the other hand becomes more simple.
Mm.
I do think we're going to continue to have epiphanies and revelations and, um, you know, knowledge or wisdom, call it wisdom, higher love, whatever,
Mhm.
increase
Mm.
in all
Yeah.
regards.
Mhm. It's something that just popped into my mind as a meditation I read one time. This woman shared her meditation experience, and she was on this journey to all these different altars. And when she got to the final altar, it was a door. And when she walked through the door, there was just another door. And she
Mm-hmm.
walked through that door, and it was just another door.
Mm-hmm.
And she realized, like, go the farther we go, like there's just another door as long as we're um, in a linear experience, basically,
Yeah.
as long as we're seeing it from a linear identity. So I'm not sure why that came up, but I figured I'd mention it because it popped in.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That there's always the next, like, where are we headed? What's going to be through that next door? And it's more doors. And I don't know. Somehow that seems to like land me in the now even more sometimes.
Well, we know that the universe doesn't flatline like an EKG monitor. You know, it's
Right.
doing this. And at the
Yeah.
same time, it's not going to the same height and the same depth every time either.
Hmm.
So there's not only is there no stagnation and no flat line, but there's also a continued expansion, you know, which if you flip it,
Mhm.
you have, you know, a more extreme beneath the line.
Mhm.
This is what we do. This is what we've been
Mhm.
doing.
Right.
But something about this trip to me is and I don't have full recall of you know to the degree that some people do.
Mhm.
You know, I wouldn't say that I have a whole lot. Where I always end up is I'm here. You know, it feels like something very special. It feels like it's an integration of a non-physical part of me and the etherical part of me is a holy, you know, non-physical matter part of me with this that's, you know, becoming ecstatic, orgasmic. I mean,
Mhm.
miraculous, magical,
Mhm.
and a lot like what we started the show talking about, you know, with what happened with your brother. So on one hand, you have this extreme physical matter experience, including all the elements of, you know, the five senses and the emotions and everything that makes up the human aspect. And then on the other hand, like you said, I mean, think about it. You were thriving in the grief, basically is what you said. You
Yeah.
were you were actually good with it. the purging of the grief, you know?
Yeah.
So how does that work? That's not something that one end of it or the other end of it can grasp. Not from my standpoint anyway.
Yeah. Right. And it has me thinking about our personal histories and what leads to an experience being received in an expansive way. And for so much of my life, I wasn't able to grieve. I wasn't really able to cry, as something in me shut down when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it was only recently that opened back up. So for me, grieving is sometimes a celebration, a sense to it, because I can feel again. I can. There's something about it that feels just that I was desiring that experience for a long time, wishing that I could access that.
Yeah.
So maybe for me personally, that's part of what played into the grief being cathartic and you know, almost an experience of gratitude.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's another example of the paradoxical polarity, where both ends seem to be as far away from each other as possible, but the reality is they're one and the same. You know, because I can relate to that. In my early days, there was a lot of grief, but I remember the moments like you're talking about where it actually felt good. It actually felt good to let those deep guttural, you know, cries and screams out. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And it was hard, and there were moments of it that it didn't feel wanted, and it felt like, when's this going to end? You know, as I was in that darker space.
Yeah.
So it's both.
Yeah, it is both. It is both. I remember that well too. I remember saying, "When is this going to stop?" You know?
Yeah, right.
And then I can remember sitting there and in grief to a point where something kind of like came in and said, "Well, are you done yet?" Because it's not stopped. You know, you still got to get up. Yeah.
I'm wondering to myself, how much grief can be related to, or the extension of grief can be related to our personal relationship with the person. Because my brother and I can't think of any conflict that existed between us. Like it was totally clear. So it felt like maybe there just wasn't that much to reflect on, you know?
Yeah. True. Yeah.
And I wonder if grieving extends when there's more contrast in that experience with that person.
Well, yeah. Because one of the ones I mentioned, it took me about 2.5 to 3 years to have the kind of communion that you described. It took, and because there was guilt and there was shame and there was bad feelings and there was lots of stuff, you know. And then my uncle passed. My uncle passed, and you know, I'm sitting at a picnic table, and he just sat down next to me. I'm like, okay. So, and we didn't have any issues. To your point.
Yeah. And of course there's attachment and how much we, you know, that person was a part of our daily lives, and and our sense of safety and security and all of that too.
Yeah, I think another big one for me, now thinking about this, was earlier this year. I was in Hawaii. Morgan had gone back to Australia, and I don't know if it was a symptoms related or what, but I was sitting on the couch, and my heart felt like my heart just dropped, like when you're on a roller coaster and your stomach's left behind. It felt like my heart just was gone, and I thought, holy crap, I think something's going on. And I actually felt my mortality for about 10 or 15 seconds, and it freaked me out because I thought I was okay with death, you know. And so then I had to sit down with it for a while and go, okay, are you okay with it? And then I finally realized it just was such an extraordinary physical feeling, you know, it was so
Yeah.
disruptive and so unfamiliar that it just scared the hell out of me.
Yeah. Yeah. The unfamiliar, that feels like a big part of it.
Yeah.
We want to ground somewhere. We want to orient somehow. And that sounds like a disorienting experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Exactly. But you know what? If the same thing happened today, I think I'd probably be much better. And maybe these are the types of things that are happening to us, whether they be a dimensional experience, or we feel energy in the room, or something such as this with somebody transitioning, or whatever the case is. You know, like kind of like building us up. You know, building up our strength or ability to cope or balance or stay in balance. Because I think about that almost every day. I think about, like, especially when we lay down at night, we connect. You know, after we're done, I'll sit there for, you know, a little while by myself, and I'll just be like, show me something, you know, and I'll see energy, and it's as I was talking to something outside of me, but I'm really talking to myself, saying, do you really want to see it? Are you really prepared to see something more? You know,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Right. Then that hesitation comes in.
Not out of
Yeah.
fear, but just out of protecting the human psyche.
Mm.
You know, being brave is you know, is a virtue, but it also can be very stupid.
Right. I wonder how much of it's courage and how much of it's foolishness.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's see. Joanne says, the more you let the grief in and fully allow yourself to feel it without any guilt, she said, I found the less it had a hold on me. And she also makes a great point. She says, I do understand grief is a very individual thing. And I think that's another thing too, is maybe we're moving out of the, you know, what I would consider like a codependent type frequency, which is, I believe what we're all leaving. You know, when you would go to someone and say, get over it, you know, I'm like, everybody's got their own way, their own amount of time, whatever the case is.
Right.
That's, I think, an old pattern, you know, an old pattern of ego preservation or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting interesting. Because if you look at the energetics of everything we do, it's obviously, you break it down to service to self in a 5D fashion or service to self in a 3D fashion. Knowing that service to self in a 5D fashion is serving the collective, the best thing you can do. Yeah. But so many of these things that we were unaware of in our past, because they were patterns, you know, unconscious patterns, have come to the surface. And I think that's been a real challenge to our unnatural nature of self-judgment. You know, like you realize something, you have a big epiphany, and then you realize what an asshole you were. And I think you know, I started to look at, well, I'm just happy I know now. You know, I mean, you still got to clear some self-judgment, but it seems to be coming easier.
Yeah. I guess in that sense, guilt can almost serve humility. So we can look back on it and maybe feel some of that pain around our own. Maybe guilt's not the right word for it. Maybe it's just awareness of how we created separation.
Well, I think it is, but I think it is the right word. I mean, if you think about it, what is a shadow? You know, and then if you think about how can we detect shadow now that we're less afraid to face our shadow? Where do you feel guilty? Where do you feel shame? Where have you blamed? You know, yourself or others? And, you know, so you start to look at these things that were bad words, and you start to say, oh, wait a minute, there's those doors, there's those infinite doors you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
And that, to some degree, that feels like part of what we could call ego death is those
Mhm.
those revelations, those moments of, oh wow, look at what my actions, the impact of that on myself and on other people.
Yeah.
And there's this painful, for me, experience of that feels like a beautiful letting go, but the process is often not one that's pleasant.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing this. I think it was either. Well, I guess it was a meditation, visualization, and this is years ago. Like 10, 15 years ago, and they said, okay, so like you're like in a pond. It was a ripple thing,
Mhm.
and it was like kind of a positive thing. Like think about visualize these ripples coming out from you as you do good, right? And so you're in this meditation and everything, and then right when they got you visualizing that, they're like, now flip it. Flip it to the other way. Like, no, you did something that was a real asshole or whatever.
Mm,
And look at
yeah.
it's the same level, you know. But
Yeah, feel those
but
ripples.
but
Yeah.
but now we can look at it and I think that's what the whole thing was too. We were creating the whole time and manifesting the whole time, but we were unconscious. Now we're conscious. And in order to be
Yeah.
conscious, you've got to be honest and aware and on your toes in regard to the guilt, the shame, the blame. There is no excuse for it. And what I mean by that is I don't mean it the way it sounds. What I mean is it's either there or it's not. Death either exists or it doesn't. Shame, blame, guilt, fear, all that stuff either exists or it doesn't. I think we're at a point now where we're choosing what we want in our universe. And
Yeah.
I think more and more every day we're making that choice not to include those things.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said earlier, not because, what did you say? Well, in other words, you realize that you were on this track and we can control the tempo. It doesn't have to be, Todd living out of a suitcase. It can be something more than that. It can be less pain and suffering. And these are like red flags for us. Just, clues to what needs to be solved.
Yeah.
So we don't have to hate it all anymore. Kick ourselves in the ass anymore.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we turn our back on what we've done that hasn't been resolved or what we do. Right.
Another word popping in for me is innocence. It seems like that starts to show up more. A recognition of innocence that can be held simultaneously with ownership.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there really is no blame here.
Yeah.
Because if there's blame, somebody's not innocent.
Right.
Separation is separation.
Yeah.
You
right.
want to dress it up.
Yeah. It does seem black and white sometimes. Like either we're in a separation perspective or we're not.
Yeah. Which is our choice now. And we choose unity, oneness. Man, I appreciate you dropping in today. My condolences to you and your family.
You.
And
appreciate it.
Thank you for having the guts and the fortitude, the intestinal fortitude to put that on camera. I'm gonna have to go watch them now, and sharing that because that's full of code. That's full of code. What you did, and it's not the words. It wasn't the words. That was a heart power move. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was an OG move, man. Original God. That was an original God goddess move. See you later, brother. Take care.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Todd. You too.
Yeah, we'll do it again. See you. Bye-bye.